From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Kamala Harris lays out her economic plan in a speech and an 80-page document. What did we learn about her economic plans and policies? Plus, New York Mayor Eric Adams is indicted on 5 counts of bribery, fraud, and campaign finance violations. We'll look at the charges and discuss whether he can stay in his job as mayor as Democrats call for him to resign. Welcome to Potomac Watch, our daily opinion page podcast with the Wall Street Journal editorial page. I'm here with my colleagues Alicia Finley and Bill McGurn. So let's start here with Kamala Harris. Let's listen to her talk about her plans for housing.
We will cut the red tape that stops homes from being built and take on, in addition, corporate landlords who are hiking rental prices. And we will work with builders and developers to construct 3 million new homes and rentals for the middle class, because increasing the housing supply will help drive down the cost of housing. We will also help first-time homebuyers just get their foot in the door with the $25,000 down payment assistance.
All right, and let's listen to her talk about how she'll pay for all this.
But we're going to have to raise corporate taxes, and we're going to have to make sure that the biggest corporations and billionaires pay their fair share. That's just it. It's about paying their fair share. I am not mad at anyone for achieving success, but everyone should pay their fair share. And it is not right that the teachers and the firefighters that I meet every day across our country are paying a higher tax than the richest people in our country.
Well, Alicia, not a lot of new detail in those things. A couple of things on housing, which we can break down, and a lot less specificity in how she'll pay for it. If she says fair share one more time, I will shoot myself. I think overall, you look at the whole presentation, how different is her program from Joe Biden's?
I think it's basically exactly the same. I mean, she adopts a lot of the Biden policies. In fact, it was the Biden idea was to impose rent control or a 5% cap using tax breaks as basically the stick. 5% nation net on an annual basis. That was actually a Biden policy. If you look at most other things in her plan, the caring economy with universal pre-K and affordable childcare, all that. The $3,600 child tax credit, that was all Biden. Most of the tax increases that she pitches were also part of the Biden budget. Now, she does propose to expand some of these things, such as with the $6,000 newborn tax credit. Should go further with even more subsidies for housing, such as the one she proposed for $25,000 in down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. More subsidies for low-income housing development. There's more on union. She adopts a lot of the union policies or pro-union policies of the Biden administration, including support for the PRO Act that would ban right to work in states, or among other things. But there really isn't very much new here.
But it's interesting. I mean, in many respects, she is politically trying to distance herself, Bill, from Joe Biden. She's trying to distance herself politically. She doesn't mention Bidenomics anymore. And yet, when you dig into what she's actually proposing, it's pretty much the same, only in many respects more so than what Joe Biden proposed. Because when she talks about elder care, when she talks about child care, when she talks about so many of these spending programs, those were essential parts of the Build Back Better plan that Biden first proposed in his first couple of years, and that were blocked by Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema.
Yeah, even the specific policy proposals, what she's offering is what Democrats usually offer, a government-centered vision of the economy. You would never know that a business created a job or something. They have all these code words, investment, which doesn't mean like Paul Jago investing in a 401k, his own money. It means the government taking Paul Jago's money and spending on what they want to. And you mentioned fair share. I mean, if someone was paying 99.99%, they would talk about fair share, because what fair share really means is more. we want more. No matter what you're paying, we want more. And I think she's actually kind of clever to give these speeches. Stuart Varney called her speech, it sounded like a first-year sociology student, discussing the economy. But that's smart, because if they get into specifics, I don't think it would be that popular with the American people. The parallels would be what we just had with Joe Biden for 4 years. So they have to disguise it, and then you cover it with words like joy and so forth. But it's the same old government-centric kind of view of the economy. And that's why I'd go further and say it's rational for Democrats to vote for Kamala Harris, even if they don't know her specific policy prescriptions, because it's going to be a left of center, government-centric economic program.
All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll have more on the political impact of Kamala Harris's economic plan when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot here on Potomac Watch with Bill McGurn and Alicia Finley, and we're talking about the Harris economic plan. Alicia, the clip where she was talking about how she would pay for it was with Stephanie Ruhle of MSNBC, sympathetic very much to Kamala Harris as a candidate. But what was interesting there to me is Harris really worked very hard not to say anything specific more than corporate tax increase, the rich, corporations, fair share, because she doesn't want to touch on, I think, the tremendous size of the tax increase that would be required to pay even some of this, which in the calculation for the Biden budget is about $5 trillion.
Right. I think she actually calls it in her document, common sense tax reform for millionaires and billionaires, which is a euphemism for the ages. She does propose a 28% corporate tax increase, up from 21%. She mentions a higher capital gains tax that would be 28% actually, but if you add on the 5% surcharge that is in the Biden budget, which is not mentioned, is in her plan, it would really be close to 33%. She mentions an international, the global minimum tax required. The Biden administration has sought to negotiate with the Organization of Economic Developed Countries at 21%. And so there's a lot of allusions to tax increases, but without any real specifics. So you kind of have to judge it by what's in the Biden budget and use that as the baseline. Because if you were actually to attempt to pay for other policies like the down payment assistance, the $6,000 newborn, it gets to be, not to mention all the caring economy. If you recall, the Build Back Better plan costs $5 trillion over a decade. It gets to be extremely expensive.
And this is all put in general terms of it's helping the middle class, the opportunity economy. It is opportunity for all. It's all good things. You're for that. I'm for that. Who's against that?
Well, I'm against hers. But
but in terms of the rhetoric, it's packaged in a way that it would be hard for anybody to oppose. You have to actually get into the specifics to realize that it's an enormous increase in spending, an enormous increase in regulation, an enormous increase in taxes. And when you get into her housing plan, for example, there are three main planks of it, right? You got the $25,000 new subsidy for first-time buyers. Now, we don't know exactly how much that would cost, but it would not be cheap.
Right.
And it's the sort of thing that is not going to increase housing supply. It's going to increase housing demand. And if you do that without an increase in supply, what do you get? Higher housing prices. To counter that with, Alicia was talking about the National Rent Control Plan, which is an extraordinary thing when you think about it, because she would try to dictate from Washington the maximum that local landlords could increase their rents. Real estate is a local business. It's depending on local supply and demand and zoning laws and all of that. And rent control, wherever it's tried, is a catastrophe. It shrinks the supply of housing. And then the third thing she would propose is a federal intrusion into local zoning laws. That's when she says we're going to get rid of red tape. What she means is we're going to get in there and determine that you in Bergen County, New Jersey, must have more multifamily housing, a more so-called affordable housing in all kinds of places. And sometimes that can be very useful because sometimes housing laws are restrictive. But dictating that from Washington is a great intrusion on local government and families and neighborhoods, Bill.
Yeah, I think it's a colossal amount of disregard. They don't even consider the classic law of unintended consequences. You and I assume we couldn't do that. We couldn't set prices for different markets. But she's proposing things like going after price gouging. Like if someone had a higher price on tomatoes than she thought was right, they'd be in trouble. It's really a tremendous exercise in ego and indifference to consequences. Small prices can have big effects. The only thing I agree with her in her statement about housing is that I think she says at one point, the way to bring down prices is more supply, low. And that's right.
Sure.
But as you pointed out, her policies would actually stifle supply. I mean, the supply will take care of itself if they unleashed the laws. If they did cut through the red tape, they don't need subsidies and so forth. Look at the difference between California and Texas in terms of home building. People are leaving California because they can't afford housing. And in Texas, there's enough housing because no one gets in the way.
Yeah, that's clear around Houston, for example, where there are very non-restrictive zoning laws. So, Alicia, this is a political document. It's meant to help her win election in her own right, to keep the Democrats in control of the White House. The polls also show that actually the voters don't like Biden policies, which is, I suppose, why she's disguising them. But I've been struck that this speech hasn't gotten a lot of attention, and it's only been a day, so we don't know how Trump will handle it. But does this give Trump an advantage? And is he exploiting that advantage?
I think that's part of the problem. He's not exploiting the advantage. There really isn't anything new in this speech that she hasn't laid out before or that isn't in the Biden plan. A lot of polls show that Americans, voters, don't really think that they know enough about what her plans are. And that's really what this document was a response to, is to actually try to lay out a policy and say, here you go. This is what she stands for. And of course, it's in general and vague terms. So we really still don't know what she stands for, except higher taxes, more spending, more industrial policies, and just broad terms. Now, the problem with Trump is that he's a little bit intellectually confused too, in that he's kind of muddied the waters by supporting now price controls on credit card interest rates, tax exemptions for tips, overtime, Social Security, these carve-outs for certain groups, which is a little bit of what the Harris plan is.
With the $100 billion she wants to spend for manufacturing subsidies. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we'll see how the economic argument turns here in the coming days and weeks.